A warm welcome in today's podcast. My name is Ntandogai Nsigane, and today we explore the prospects of women in politics through the lens of the SADC-Lawyers Association report titled Promotion of Gender Responsiveness in the ACDEG, Law and Policies on Political Participation of Women in Elections and Electoral Processes through Civic Technology in the SADC region. Now joining me in so that we delve deeper and understand this report is international relations expert Taurai Chirere. Good to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So before we delve deeper into the report, the implementations and what it entails, I think maybe for the benefit of the viewers, help us understand what ACDEG is and what it stands for, basically.
Okay, ACDEG, it is the African Charter on Democracy, Election and Governance. It is of 2007. So its objective are to pave way for gender-conscious approach to democratic governance by explicitly aiming to promote gender balances and equality in governance and developmental processes.
So now that we understand at least where we are heading to, now help us understand what the report entails, its implementations, and the provisions that are stated within the report, just in summary form.
So in summary, the report has got 7 sections. I'll take you through the section. The first section, it provides an introduction and background to the research, including the objective and the research methodology utilized. And then section 2 presents the research findings, including the situational analysis of women participation in politics and also in the governance processes in the SADC region, as well as the challenges faced by women in politics. So section 3, it outlines the key international and regional normative frameworks that supports women's political participation. And then section 4 delves into the African Charter on Democracy, Election and Governance, that's ACDEG, and how it has been implemented with regards to women's political participation, including emerging opportunities, the social-political legal context, and also the data collection efforts. And then section 5, it then gives the role of continental and SADC institutions in promoting women's political participation and the use of civic technology. And then section 6 and 7, they identify the legal policy gaps, electoral laws within the SADC region, and then gives recommendations.
All right, thank you very much. So what are some of the outcomes that the report entails or that they give us, basically?
Okay, thank you for that. In terms of outcomes, the report basically gives sort of a normative framework which paved way for the development of legal structures that advocate for women's political participation by African states. So the report started by looking at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which forms the basis of all human rights. It mainly speaks to issues around respecting, protecting, and fulfilling all human rights. And then the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights of 1966 mainly articulated that men and women have equal participation in public life. So the report also talks on the Convention of the Political Rights of Women, which was of 1952, which talks about the involvement of women in all elections, that women have to be eligible for election and for public office. So we have also the Beijing Declaration of 1995, which was a platform for action which took measures that encouraged political parties to integrate women into elective and non-elective public positions in the same proportion at the same level as men. So that is like 50-50. So in the African context, we have the African Charter on the Human and People's Rights, which is popularly known as the Maputo Protocol of 2003. So this charter is very important because it domesticates the international conventions down to the African level. So Article 2, for example, urged member states to take positive action to promote participative governance, ensure participation of women through affirmative action, through enabling legislation, and through other measures. Also, we have an AU Gender Policy and Action Plan of 2009. So the policy provides a basic standard for the elimination of barriers to gender equality. We're going to be talking about the barriers that affect participation of women. So this one set the tone in terms of how to foster reorientation of existing institutions so that they overcome these barriers. So the AU policy developed a strategy on gender equality and women's empowerment, which started in 2018 and will be running through 2028. And it was launched during the AU Summit in February 2019. So at the SADC level, we have the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, which was of 2008 and then revised in 2016. So this one presents a more radical stance to improving the representation of women in government and own decision-making spaces, that is public, private, and social spheres, that we should have 50-50 representation. They call it the zebra type of representation, whereby there's equal representation within the within parliament, I should say. And then these protocols are very, very, very important because they form the basis for participation of women. And then the Sustainable Development Goals. Now everyone talks about the Sustainable Development Goals. Specifically SDG 5, it talks about achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. And then SDG 5.5 states that it has to ensure that there is full women participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels in decision-making processes, either political, economic, or public life. So we also have SDG 10, which talks about reduced inequality within and among countries. And there's a section there which also talks about inclusion, that is empowering and promoting the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of race, age, and gender.
You did go through various SADC, AU, and also the SDGs,
yes.
What promotion they do to women in politics and everything. But looking at how things are currently, what's the current state of women's political participation, representation, and also influence in terms of governance in the SADC region? Okay.
So let's take it from an African perspective first. So for participation of women to become reality, these international, regional and international frameworks, which we just discussed, they need to be ratified at national level. Ratification simply means a country is agreeing to the prepositions which will be put through in the convention. So if you look at the CEDAW, which we discussed earlier on, countries like Algeria, Ethiopia, Lesotho, Mauritania, Niger, they ratified the convention, but with reservations. And then Central African Republic, Chad, Madagascar, Niger, and then the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, South Sudan. These are all parties to the Maputo Protocol. Okay. So before we even talk about the extent to which they are being implemented, I think it would be good if we just discuss more in terms of the ACDEG, in terms of its provision, in terms of encouraging political participation of women. So they are very, let me just take, for example, Article 21.2 of which talks about electoral observer missions, that they should recognize the principles of gender equality when elections are being held. And then states should recognize crucial roles that women play in development. And then there should be necessary conditions for full and active participation of women in the decision-making processes at all levels, which they viewed as very fundamental. So there are a lot of articles in that thing which really support the participation of women.
Okay, so now, furthermore, the report highlights the progress and also the challenges that women face in accessing and shaping political decision making. So now, in that regard, can you provide an overview in the key trends and the achievements in areas requiring further action, so that we can see women participating more in electoral processes?
Okay, thank you for that. I think let me just try to summarize what the report highlights with regards to that. But in terms of the political systems, it is important for our viewers to note the political systems which govern elections in the SADC countries. So there is what we call proportional representation system, whereby citizens vote for parties that are allocated seats in a parliament according to the percentages of votes they receive. So it can be an open system whereby voters determine who is on the list, or a closed system where the political party itself provides the list. Then there's a second one, which is the first past the post system. This one is basically a winner takes all, whereby citizens vote not just for the party, but they'll be knowing which individual they are voting for. So it has got defined like constituencies. Then there's the one which looks at the mixed one. It takes in the proportional representation and first past the ballot systems. So it sort of includes all that. So for giving examples now, countries that use proportional representation are known to have sort of the best, they are better off in terms of inclusion of women in political participation. So these countries include Angola, Namibia, and South Africa, which have a higher representation of women. And then countries using the first past the post system, we have Botswana, Comoros, the DRC, Eswatini, Madagascar, Malawi, and Mauritius. Even Seychelles and Zambia, but these are known to have the least women representation. And then there's the mixed, which we're talking about. That's where you find your Tanzania, your Zimbabwe, and your Lesotho. So these systems are very important because they are the one which forms the sort of the basis in which gives condition whether women participate or should not participate. So, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, the percentage of elected women in national parliaments in the past 2 decades generally has been on the rise. For example, if you look at 23, the regional average for women in the SADC in both houses was like 24.5%, but by 2022 it had moved to 30.9%. So this is a steady rise in terms of the number of women participating in parliament. So in terms of ratification, we've talked about countries that haven't ratified, some ratified with reservations, but in terms of who has the most women in their local parliaments, we see Rwanda has over 61% women legislators. I think they're the best in the world. So if you give examples for countries like Zimbabwe, which you said it combines both systems, it has 31% of its 270 seats, which are then being held by women. And also Mozambique, 42% of its total 250 seat parliaments are also held by women. So this is being facilitated because these countries have pushed in for quota systems whereby they reserve parliamentary seats for women. Some even have for youth. But generally, if you look at the number of female legislators who get into parliament, it's only about 5% who are under the age of 30. Yeah. So if you also look at how women have been faring in terms of the governance aspect side of politics, you see that, for example, during COVID, we had 13 female health ministers, including 9 qualified doctors. So in terms of the actual positions in Africa, currently we have 2 female heads of states, that is in Ethiopia and in Tanzania. And we also have countries which has female vice presidents, for example, Zambia. So they seem to be a steady increase in the level of and quality of participation of women in politics.
I think we love to see a world where women are also included.
Definitely.
Now, going back into the report, it provides an analysis of key policies aimed at advancing women's participation, and also the ACDEG's provisions and the implementations in the SADC region. So can you please summarize these findings, because I understand there are quite a lot, but just help us understand in summary version.
Okay. So in terms of implementation of ACDEG, the report states that it is still a bit premature to measure the impact of this convention in the African landscape. Why? Because states have been developing reporting standards, which hasn't been concluded yet. But the convention itself, it presents opportunities for engagement and improvements in women participation. So the responsibility mainly in monitoring the charter's implementation, it lies with regional economic communities, that is your SADC. So their role is to promote the extensive engagement with stakeholders and member states and citizens, civil society. So their role is sort of to play a coordinating role to ensure that this convention becomes reality. So the AU still has to come up with benchmarks for compliance assessment with regards to this convention. And then member states themselves have a duty to ensure that they implement this convention and other AU shared values addressing women's rights comprehensively. So in terms of ratification, ACDEG was ratified by South Africa, Nigeria, and Algeria. So 17 more countries are in the process of ratifying this convention, which means to say that we are going to see more participation of women, provided they implement, they move from rhetoric to action, implementing what the convention says.
Okay. So now you mentioned various countries having to implement the ACDEG, and you know how it might have to work. So what is the status currently in terms of the ACDEG implementation in Africa as a whole?
Oh, in Africa as a whole, that's exactly what I've been just saying previously, that the implementation now would depend on the level of engagement by the states with regards to these international conventions. For example, the ACDEG focuses on democracy, human rights, issues like rule of law, genuine commitment for states, which is quite essential. So if a country is moving towards, inclining more towards democracy, we are going to be seeing a more involvement of women in the political sphere, because they will be guided by these frameworks. So you get to see that stable democracies will tend to include more female participation than authoritarian regimes. So it will then depend on the cultural aspects being transformed to be more accommodative to women. So if you see before this convention, there were less women in decision-making bodies before 2007. But after 2007, as I've said earlier, you see a steady rise in women involvement in politics. And even the legal frameworks, they have been steadily improving over time. I think we can as well discuss in terms of in the SADC country by country, to see what deficiencies the report is unearthing, and how does the report sort of recommend that the states should do. So, for example, if you look at countries like, I think we can go country by country. Yeah. For example, Angola, it has got an electoral act which directs political parties to promote equal opportunities and equity between women and men. But however, there are no penalties for non-compliance, and then political parties are getting away with non-compliance. These things can be improved by improving the legal frameworks. And in Botswana, they've got two acts governing the elections. That is the Electoral Act of 2012 and the Local Government Act of, again, 2012, they guide the electoral processes in Botswana, but the laws do not provide for specific measures to ensure women representation. Though they are making strides because they've come up with a gender and development policy, which they are using as a gender intervention tool, and they've come up with a gender commission. So these are quite interesting times for Botswana, because it is going to improve its legal provisions and ensuring that there's full participation of women. Because if you look at, for example, in 2009, the results are not very intriguing, because there were only 3 female parliamentarians who were elected, because they use first past the post system. So these we hope they are going to improve the status of women. And then if you look at the Comoros Islands, they have no quota system, and they have temporary measures to promote women participation in the electoral processes. So even though their constitution recognizes and guarantees that youths and women have rights, access to political rights, but it's not being implemented on the ground. So in the DRC, there is also issues of non-adherence to constitutional provisions, which means to say that the legal frameworks are there. They have the DRC electoral law, which is not aligned to the constitution, which gives problems. So alignment of laws and constitutionalism needs to sort of improve. And then, for example, in Lesotho, there's mixed proportional electoral systems, and so it's also presenting a problem at that level. Why? Because it is resulting in unstable coalitions within political parties, and there's a lot of infighting, floor crossing, rather than the parliamentarians playing a representative role. So these things can be improved by improving the legal frameworks. And then Malawi has no sort of specific measures that encourage women participation. So that needs to be implemented, because the Gender Equality Act is only being enforced in the public sector, but not at the National Assembly. So those are issues that needs to be created. And then other countries like, for example, South Africa and Zimbabwe, they have no political parties. There's no legislation that forces political parties to include women in their structures. So this becomes a problem, and there's also a problem whereby there's only rhetoric with no meaningful engagement. There's no meaningful inclusion of women in for example, decision-making processes. So this is quite a problem. There's need for example, political party leaders to move from rhetoric to action. I know there are women leagues within their political parties, but they don't expand much to hold influential positions. So those things were noted by the report that they need to be improved.
Okay. So are there any deficiencies that maybe were highlighted by the report?
Okay, the deficiencies are what we've just been discussing is part of the deficiencies. But although the policy directive of the AU and the regional economic communities, they aim to promote gender parity in democracy, the implementation now is the big problem. Mm-hmm. And the report notes issues around institutional barriers, discriminatory social norms, and then there are instances of violence and intimidation, which continue to undermine the political participation of women. And then there's a very big disconnect between policy aspirations and the reality.
So now, coming back into the report, it does mention, the Civic. We are in a technological environment as it is, and there's AI, there are mobile applications and everything. So it is highlighted in the report that it can be used as a tool to enhance women in political responsiveness and the ACDEG, the implementation and everything. So take us through the implementation of this Civic tracker, how it can bring all these implementation policies and everything into one mobile application.
Okay, thank you for that question. It's quite critical. Actually, if you look at Africa, we have the lowest mobile and internet penetration, which is around about 28.2. But despite this, there's a potential for civil technology to revolutionize how women participate. So the report highlights a few incidences where technology has helped in terms of enhancing the participation of women. So it gives a lot of examples. I'll just give one or two examples. And there is the ACDEG Gender Barometer. It is a civic technology tool that is essential in assessing the extent to which ACDEG is promoting and protecting the rights of women. So before we go to the tool, because the tool came up as a result of successes of earlier on technologies which helped participation of women. So the report notes there were campaigns, for example, which created platforms. For example, She Votes Namibia, Elections ZW. This was provided online voter education guidelines. It provided candidates profiles, voting procedures in all languages, empowering women to make informed decisions when they were navigating the electoral processes. And then in Botswana, there was Women for Politics Botswana. And then there's the Young Female Politicians Network South Africa. These ones facilitated knowledge sharing, campaign strategies, mentorship opportunities. In Kenya, there's Politely Kenya. And then in Zimbabwe, there was She Decides Zimbabwe. So these ones have allowed for women to report incidences of issues around hate speech, online harassment. So these ones were very the sort of the precedents which then gave the resolution that we need to come up with a specific tool that is ongoing, where women and the youth, everyone can just go into the tool and then see what's happening. So the civil tracker now comes in after the report. It is a comprehensive platform that educates users on the current state of women participation. So the tool itself will be highlighted will be sort of updated on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So the platform it is available on Google Play Store. It is there on Apple Store, and then its purpose is to give clear, measurable status on the rights of women. Mm-hmm. So it has got profiles. It highlights or showcases participation of women in democracy and the electoral processes. So it's quite a useful app which users can get real-time data before, during, and after elections.
Okay, so now as we round up, what are some of the provisions or key trends, recommendations, and innovative trends that were highlighted in the report that can maybe be implemented so that we can see more inclusion? You did mention countries like South Africa and Zimbabwe that have not yet, reached Rwanda type of state. So what are some of the recommendations that the report gives so that all these other issues can be taken care of and maybe possibly change?
So the recommendations were divided into two main categories, one for nation states and the other one for regional economic communities, electoral management bodies, and civil society. Mm-hmm. So in terms of recommendation to the states, the report highlights that there's need to reform political parties' finance registration to ensure ease of women to public finances, given that access to finances affects women's ability to compete against their male counterparts. It's just that we would have discussed more in terms of what barriers impairs women from active political participation. So it's there in the report. So let me just do it just here, because it mentioned issues around political harassment, violence against women, cultural norms which puts women as second-class citizens. So, and also there are institutional barriers which makes it hard for women to navigate. So this one recommendation specifically was talking to this finances aspect, that when women engages in politics, they should be given adequate financial support from their political parties so that they compete effectively. So issues around tackling violence against women through developing deterrent sanctions, states can do that so that there's no violence against women during, after, or even before elections. And then compliance with the statutory norms, which we were just, the conventions that we mentioned. It is the duty of governments to ratify those conventions. And then there are what we call mandatory temporary special measures. Those ones also include issues around introducing quota systems. So countries can adopt them so that there is increased participation of women. And then the most important one was then implementation. There's domestication, yes, ratification, yes, but the most important part the research highlights is about the implementation of these SADC protocols on gender and development, and aligning electoral laws with these international best practices. They came out strongly as a big recommendation. And then for civil society, and then civil societies, regional economic communities, this can forge partnerships between young women and make supportive arrangements such that they also participate in politics. So electoral management bodies, they should give enough civil education to institutions so that the women, the youth, young women can therefore have the zeal to engage in the politics of the day. So there's need for provision of technical and financial support to youth and women. NGOs can do that so that women's participation is amplified. And also, in terms of changing societal norms, NGOs can do campaigns that involve a lot of young women so that they engage in political processes, and then try to tackle these entrenched societal norms to say that women are not second-class citizens. They can be active political party players who even provide meaningful change in the constituencies they serve. So all these the regional economic communities can do. And then strengthening of civil society itself, the continental, regional, and national women civil society networks, they need to be strengthened so that they will stand for women to take part in the political processes.
No, thank you very much. That was a very educational and yet informative analysis. Now, thank you very much, viewers at home, for joining us in today's edition. Now, as a young woman myself, I encourage other young women to go through the report and also the mobile application so that you educate yourself in terms of what is happening in terms of politics in and around the country and also in the SADC region. So from here, thank you very much. Stay safe.